The coastline stretches before us with a quiet grace that almost takes the breath away, the sea rolling in soft, steady waves, each one folding into the next as if time itself had slowed. The morning air is cool and tinged with salt, filling the lungs with a freshness that clears the mind. Gentle light spills across the horizon, neither bold nor harsh, but warm enough to draw the eyes toward the shifting surface of the water. The ocean holds an endless fascination, not only for its vastness, but also for its secrets. It whispers to those who stand on its edge as if inviting them to listen carefully, to step closer, and to discover the hidden stories carried upon its tides. The sand beneath the feet is cool, dampened by the retreat of the waves, and each step leaves a fleeting imprint that the sea seems eager to reclaim. A hush surrounds this place, though not one of emptiness. It is a quiet filled with meaning, where every sound of water meeting shore feels like a word in a language we long to understand. The breeze lifts gently, playing with strands of hair and carrying with it a promise of something yet unknown. Such a setting, serene and unspoiled, invites reflection. It is here, among the rhythmic movements of the waves and the unbroken line of the horizon, that hearts are most ready to open themselves to wonder. Nature, in her gentlest form, seems to prepare us for the unexpected. The coastline does not demand attention with thunder or storm. Instead, it calls softly, persistently, as though only those willing to listen with patience may grasp its meaning. The sea becomes more than a landscape, it becomes a companion, one that shares in our solitude and mirrors the stillness or turbulence within us. On this particular morning, the calm is extraordinary, so complete that it feels as if the world has paused just long enough for one extraordinary meeting to unfold. The mind, when given such peace, begins to wander freely. Every detail of the scene sharpens, the sparkle of sunlight on the water, the cool spray that leaps into the air when a wave curls and breaks, the distant call of seabirds as they trace patterns above the tide. These details do not stand alone. They weave together into a fabric of anticipation, one that suggests the moment holds more than what can be seen at first glance. The coastline is not simply a stretch of sand and sea, it is a stage, and something remarkable is about to appear upon it. One cannot help but feel the weight of possibility pressing gently upon the heart. The ocean's surface, though calm, hides countless mysteries. Each ripple might conceal a story, each wave might bring with it a new beginning. Standing there, the spirit feels both small and infinite, humbled by the immensity of the sea, yet emboldened by its promise of discovery. The beauty of the coastline does not lie only in its appearance, but in what it awakens within us, a readiness to believe that the unexpected can change everything. As the waves continue their timeless dance, a sense of inevitability builds, though it cannot yet be named. There is a quiet certainty that something unforgettable is waiting just beyond sight. The heart stirs as if attuned to an unseen rhythm, one that the sea itself seems to play. It is in such moments, when the world is at its most tranquil, that destiny often steps forward. The serene coastline, with its unassuming charm and gentle grandeur, holds within it the promise of a meeting that will alter the course of memory. And it is here, at this very edge where land meets sea, that Richard's story truly begins. Richard stood for some time on the edge of the sand, content to lose himself in the patterns of the sea. Yet as the tide swelled and the waves stretched farther along the shore, something drew his eye away from the horizon and into the shifting waters themselves. At first it was no more than a suggestion, a figure moving where no figure should have been. He narrowed his gaze, uncertain if it was merely the play of light or the trickery of foam dancing over the surface. But as the waves fell back and rose again, the form grew clearer. It was a woman, distant yet unmistakably there, moving with such natural ease that she seemed almost part of the ocean itself. Her presence startled him, though not in the way one might expect. There was no fear in seeing her, rather there was fascination, as though he had stumbled upon a vision not meant for ordinary eyes. She did not struggle against the current, nor did she fight the strength of the water. Instead, she moved within it with quiet grace, her figure bending and swaying in harmony with each swell, like a melody played upon the strings of the sea. It was a sight that caught hold of him, refusing to release his attention. The more he watched, the more the world around him seemed to fade, until the coastline, the breeze, and even the steady rhythm of the waves became only a backdrop for this solitary figure. Her hair shimmered in the shifting light, strands clinging to her shoulders only to be carried away again by the spray. The water touched her as if it knew her, as if the sea itself had chosen her as its companion. Richard could not look away, though he hardly dared to move closer for fear the vision might vanish as suddenly as it had appeared. There was an air of mystery about her that both unsettled and intrigued him. Who was she, and why did she linger there half, hidden by the restless tide? The questions formed quickly, yet none could be answered, for she gave no sign of noticing him. Her face, turned partly toward the horizon, seemed lost in thought, as if she carried within her the weight of secrets the sea had whispered only to her. Richard felt in that instant as though he were intruding upon a moment sacred and unspoken. Yet the pull to remain, to witness, and to understand was stronger than any sense of propriety that might have urged him to turn away. The connection he felt was not one of recognition, but of discovery. Though he had never seen her before, there was something in her manner, in the way she belonged so completely to the water, that stirred a sense of familiarity deep within him. It was as if some hidden part of his soul had always known she would appear, and now that she had, he was powerless to deny her presence. The curiosity that welled up inside him was not shallow or fleeting. It was the kind of wonder that lingers, that refuses to rest until it is satisfied. As she moved, her gestures seemed to carry a rhythm older than words, a language of silence spoken only through grace and movement. He found himself studying every detail, from the tilt of her head to the slight lift of her arms as the waves rose to meet her. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitation in her steps. Instead, there was trust in the sea that held her, and trust, perhaps unknowingly, in the gaze that now followed her so intently. Richard felt his heart shift with a quiet force he had not expected. This was no ordinary encounter, no passing glimpse of a stranger at a distance. It was something more, something that called to the imagination and the heart alike. He did not know her name, nor did he know the reason for her presence in the water, but he knew beyond doubt that he would remember this vision as long as breath remained in him. The sea had offered him a mystery, wrapped in the form of a woman who seemed to belong both to this world and beyond it, and he knew with a certainty that such a moment was not to be forgotten. For a time, Richard believed she had not noticed him at all, so complete was her union with the water. Yet as the tide shifted and she turned her face toward the shore, their eyes met, and in that instant the world seemed to pause. It was not the casual glance of strangers, nor the startled acknowledgement of one surprised to be seen. It was something deeper, something that seemed to stretch far beyond the limits of time and place, as though they had known one another long before this moment, and were only now remembering it. The distance between them, filled with restless waves and endless space, seemed suddenly smaller, bridged by the silent current of recognition that passed between their eyes. There was no need for words. Words would have been too clumsy, too loud for the quiet intensity of what had awakened between them. Instead, it was a bond forged in stillness, unspoken but undeniable. Richard felt it settle over him like a weight and a comfort at once, a reminder of something both strange and familiar. He had come to the coast that morning expecting only solitude, yet now he felt less alone than he had in many years. In her gaze there was a question and an answer at once, as though she both wondered who he was and already knew. The silence that stretched between them was not empty. It was charged, alive with meanings that words would have failed to capture. Her eyes carried the shimmer of the sea, bright and restless, yet also deep, holding stories untold. He searched them without even realizing it, drawn further into their quiet invitation. She did not look away, nor did he. It was as if both understood, without agreement, that this moment mattered, and that breaking it with speech would diminish the truth of what they felt. Richard's heart beat faster, though not with fear. It was the rhythm of recognition, the strange sensation of being seen not just outwardly but inwardly, as though someone had reached past all defenses and touched what lay hidden beneath. He wondered how such a connection could spring forth so suddenly, without history, without introduction, and yet feel stronger than the bonds formed over years. Was it the sea that had carried this moment to them, or something far greater, woven through fate itself? There was a gentleness in her expression, a softness that reassured him even as it unsettled him. She seemed to understand more of him than she had any right to know, and yet he did not resist it. In her eyes he found no judgment, no expectation, only a recognition that felt strangely like acceptance. That she should offer him such a gift without a word, without even stepping from the water, struck him as something miraculous. He had not thought himself in search of connection, yet here it was, arriving with the quiet certainty of the tide. The bond between them deepened with every unbroken glance. Though the distance remained, he could almost feel her nearness, as though the air itself had carried her presence across the waves to stand before him. The ocean no longer seemed a barrier but a companion, cradling their silence and reflecting their unspoken understanding. He felt as though he could remain like this forever, lost in her gaze, forgetting entirely that the world existed beyond this stretch of shore. What surprised him most was not the suddenness of this connection, but its completeness. It felt as though nothing more was needed, no names, no stories, no assurances. The silence was enough, more eloquent than any words they might have spoken. It was as if their souls had met long before their bodies ever stood within sight of one another, and now, in this fleeting instant, they were only remembering what had always been true. The ocean moved between them still, its waves rising and falling, but it could not drown the quiet recognition that had passed from her eyes into his. Richard felt changed, though he could not say how, only that he was no longer the same man who had walked along the shore a moment ago. In the gaze of a woman half claimed by the sea, he had discovered a truth that could not be spoken yet would never be forgotten. The waves rose and fell with a rhythm that seemed to echo the very beating of Richard's heart, drawing him ever nearer to the place where sea and mystery intertwined. The ocean stretched before him, vast and untamed, its depths concealing both wonder and peril, yet it was not fear that he felt as he gazed upon it. Instead, it was a quiet pull, a force both irresistible and tender, urging him to step closer, as if the sea itself wished to close the space between him and the figure who lingered within its embrace. There was beauty in that moment, undeniable and overwhelming. The water shimmered with light, reflecting the sky's changing hues, yet all its radiance seemed to pale beside her presence. She was not apart from the sea, but a part of it, belonging to it in a way that stirred both admiration and unease. The waves curled around her with a kind of devotion, as though she were their chosen companion, and Richard could not help but envy the closeness they claimed. Each time a swell lifted her gently and set her down again. It was as though the ocean conspired to keep her just out of his reach, teasing him with nearness yet refusing to surrender her completely. Still, the heart does not yield to caution, nor does it reason with danger when love, or something very near to it, begins to stir. Richard felt no hesitation, no calculation of risk. The sea was vast, its depths uncertain, but he was certain of one thing, that he must draw nearer to her, even if it meant stepping into the same waters that both caressed and concealed her. The ocean might hold danger, but in her presence it became the very symbol of longing, deep, boundless, and unpredictable. He felt it not as an obstacle, but as a mirror of what he carried within him, for love itself is never without risk, and yet the risk is what makes it beautiful. As he moved, the sound of the waves grew louder, not in menace but in song, as though encouraging his steps. Each rush of water against the shore seemed to echo the urgency within him, a reminder that life does not wait for hesitation. He could not stand at a distance forever, content only to watch and wonder. Something within her gaze had awakened him, and now the pull of his heart was stronger than the caution of his mind. It was as if the ocean itself had chosen to reveal this secret only to him, offering him a chance he could not let pass. The closer he came, the stronger the sensation grew, a mixture of awe and surrender. He knew little of her, not even her name, yet he felt bound to her in a way that defied logic. The sea may have been her world, but in that instant he desired to share in it, no matter how uncertain or treacherous it might be. Love does not ask for safety, it asks for devotion, and devotion is never without cost. The waves might rise, the currents might resist, but his heart urged him forward, willing to face both the beauty and the danger for even a chance at closeness. He could feel the sand shifting beneath his feet as the water began to lap at his ankles, cool and insistent. The sea seemed to test him, questioning his resolve, yet he did not falter. Each step was a silent declaration, a surrender to what he felt, a willingness to be carried wherever this moment might lead. He no longer thought of himself as a solitary man standing upon the shore. He was part of a story greater than his own, one written in the language of the sea, with her as its central figure, and though he knew not what awaited him, whether joy or heartbreak, safety or ruin, he was certain of one truth: the pull of the heart cannot be resisted. It will draw us nearer, despite the waves, despite the danger, until we stand within reach of what we were always meant to find. Richard had never known such resolve as he felt in that instant, his feet sinking deeper into the wet sand as the tide climbed steadily higher, urging him forward. His heart beat in rhythm with the waves, each thundering crash against the shore echoing the surge of courage rising within him. For so long he had remained still, watching, wondering, hesitating, but at last the moment had come. He could no longer remain only a spectator of this vision before him. The distance that separated them, filled with the restless dance of water, no longer seemed insurmountable. He felt his arm begin to lift, his hand stretching ever so slightly outward, as though the very gesture might bridge the space between them and draw her into the safety of his touch. Yet even as his heart urged him onward, the sea began to reclaim what it had revealed. The waves swelled more fiercely now, and the air grew heavy with the scent of salt and spray. The woman, once clear and radiant in her form, grew more elusive with each rush of water that swept around her. She was still there, and yet she was not. The ocean clung to her as if unwilling to surrender her fully, veiling her figure beneath its restless surface. Richard strained to hold her in his gaze, desperate not to lose sight of her. but with every beat of his heart she seemed to drift farther, as though she belonged to a realm beyond his reach. It was a cruel trick of time, for he had gathered every ounce of courage to step closer, to offer himself not just in curiosity, but in devotion, and just as he did, she began to vanish. Her eyes, which had met his with such quiet power, seemed to fade like the last glow of twilight. The graceful line of her shoulders, the soft rise and fall of her movements within the water, all dissolved into the shifting waves until only fragments remained, fleeting glimpses that slipped away before he could hold them. Still he pressed forward, the sea swirling now about his knees, urging him to abandon caution altogether and wade further into its embrace. But the more he reached, the more she receded, until the truth became undeniable. She was slipping away. And yet, in her fading, she did not leave him with despair alone. There was something in the manner of her disappearance, something in the lingering warmth of her gaze, that carried not only loss but also promise. It was as though she wished him to remember, not with sorrow but with hope. The moment was fleeting, but it was enough to alter him. He stood there, chest rising and falling with the effort of his longing, the waves pulling insistently at his frame, and he felt both the ache of absence and the sweetness of having glimpsed something extraordinary. Love, or the shadow of it, had brushed against him and then withdrawn, leaving behind a mark that time could not erase. Perhaps she belonged to the ocean, perhaps to memory alone, yet the impression of her presence would remain as enduring as the sea itself. There was no bitterness in his heart as he let the water settle once more, though sorrow mingled quietly with his breath. He knew now that courage is not always rewarded with possession. Sometimes it is rewarded with understanding, with the quiet realization that some encounters are meant not to last forever, but to awaken something within us that endures beyond the moment. The woman in the water had not come to stay, but she had left him with something far greater than her presence. She had left him with longing that carried hope, a hope that love, in all its mystery, might yet find him again. And as the waves closed over the place where she had been, he turned his eyes to the horizon, not in despair, but in the quiet faith that such beauty, once revealed, is never truly lost. Richard lingered at the shoreline long after the waves had swallowed the last trace of her presence. The sea continued its endless motion, rising and falling with the same steady rhythm, but for him the world had been altered. He could not explain what had happened, nor did he feel the need to. There are moments in life that refuse to be bound by reason, moments that belong not to logic but to the heart. This was such a moment, and he understood, with a clarity that was almost humbling, that it would remain with him forever. He thought of the way her eyes had met his, how silence had spoken with more eloquence than any word could have managed. That look had reached into him, into the quiet places no one else had touched, and had awakened something he had not even known was sleeping. It was not a story to be told, not an event to be recounted with details and explanations, but a truth to be carried within, a memory that would beat in time with his heart for as long as he lived. He did not need to understand it fully, he only needed to feel it, and that was enough. The sea, which only hours ago had seemed endless and indifferent, now felt like a companion. Its rhythm reminded him of her presence, the rise and fall echoing the depth of their silent exchange. Every wave that broke upon the sand seemed to whisper the memory back to him, as though the ocean itself had conspired to preserve it. He realized then that love, in its purest form, is not always meant to be captured or possessed. Sometimes it exists only in a fleeting moment, shining brightly before fading, yet leaving behind an imprint that nothing can erase. He found no bitterness in this realization. Instead, he felt gratitude. To have experienced such a connection, however brief, was a gift. The mystery of it only deepened its beauty, for the heart is not made to solve every question. Some truths are meant to be felt without explanation, and this was one of them. The woman in the water might remain forever nameless, her story unknown, yet what she had awakened in him was undeniable. It was as though the sea had chosen him for this encounter, had drawn him to its edge on this morning, not to answer a longing, but to awaken it. In the quiet of his reflection, Richard understood that this memory would not fade with time. It would stay with him like the rhythm of the waves, sometimes soft, sometimes strong, but always present. When the world grew heavy, when solitude pressed upon him, he would return in thought to this moment, and the memory would steady him. It would remind him that love is not always a matter of possession or permanence. It is at its heart the recognition of beauty, the acknowledgement of connection, however brief, that stirs the soul and teaches it to feel more deeply. As he turned from the shore, the horizon glowed faintly with the promise of a new day. The ache in his chest was real, but it was not sorrow alone. It was mixed with hope, quiet and steady. For if such a connection could be felt once, unlooked for and without explanation, then perhaps it could be felt again. The sea had given him a gift not of certainty but of possibility, and that was enough to carry him forward. And so, with the waves behind him and the memory within him, he walked away knowing that some loves are never spoken, yet they endure, living on in silence, stronger than words could ever be. Thank you for joining me on this journey by the sea, where mystery and love spoke louder than words. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a like. It truly helps more people discover these tales. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story waiting just beyond the horizon. Share this video with a friend who loves a little romance mixed with mystery. And until we meet again, may the rhythm of the waves stay with you always.